Closed circles that are worked in rounds are a central part of making three-dimensional crochet objects like toys. And this flat circular shape is the beginning of it all. It's also useful for making other things like coasters and decorations. So a handy thing to have by itself anyway. So we'll take a look at that first, and then I'll show you how to make that circle into a three-dimensional object, like you can see with the little hippo here. So the hippo's head, the ears, slightly three-dimensional, the arms that come out as cylinders, these were all made from a shape that started off a little bit like this and then grew out, as you can see, there you go, into the shape that I wanted to make the animal that I was designing. So let's start right at the beginning with a nice two-dimensional flat circular shape. Right, so let's cut off this example with my slightly blunt scissors. There we go, and I'll pop that to one side, and we'll just have a look at how to make up a completely new circle. Circular crochet made from a magic circle is worked in what we call rounds, and that is literally a way of saying that you go round and round the circle, increasing it in size in the case of a flat object. So let's have a little look. You're going to hold your yarn over your hand and you're going to make 2 loops over your middle 2 fingers. You're then going to pinch the tail of the yarn and the rest of the body of the yarn together in your thumb and little finger. You're going to take your hook and you're going to stick it under those 2 circles, pick up the yarn and pull it through. We're then going to pick up this yarn again and pull it through this little loop here. So what you've got now is essentially a tiny noose with 2 loops forming a ring, and you're going to make single crochet US stitches into this ring, and you're going to put in the number of single crochets that you are going to need for the magic circle that you want. So in this case we're going to look at a magic circle of 6 because that's how most of my crochet toy circles begin. So you're going to put your hook through, pick up the yarn and pull it through, pick up the yarn and pull it through, and that's your first single crochet. And if you're familiar with crocheting in straight line rows, this motion will be very familiar to you. It's the one that you make into a chain loop or into an existing stitch, but we're going to put them all to begin with into the central ring. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, and what we're left with here is a line of single crochets with 2 loops coming out the other end. So to close this ring up, we're going to pinch at the first crochet and pull the yarn nice and tightly, and then we're going to take the little tail of yarn and pull that tightly too. And so what we've got here is a little swirly shell, and that is almost your magic circle closed. Now you can close your magic circle by slip stitching into this stitch here, or you can just start your continuous work in rounds, and that's what I do in toys and what I'm going to show you here from that point. So if your first round was 6 stitches, your second round for a flat circle is going to end up being 12 stitches. You want to double the number of stitches to bring it out nice and flat. So we're going to put 2 stitches into each of these. So we're aiming for a 12, so let's count up as we go to begin with. So into that first stitch, tiny bit tight on the tension there, and we're going to make 1, 2 single crochets into that, 3 and 4 into the next one, 5 and 6 into the next one, 7 and 8 into the next one, 9 and 10 into the next one, and the final 2 stitches into a single stitch, 11 and 12. Now this is handy because this has come slightly open here, and that's useful for you to see. So what we do, if we've got a slightly open circle, is we just turn it over again, hold your thumb gently over it and just pull, and it tightens up like magic. Now, if you start working and you find that this hole has opened up again, it's probably that you just didn't pull it tight enough to begin with. But you can retrospectively go in with a needle if you get to the point where, say, you've got like your toy worked up, but his nose is open up. You just sew in there and tighten it up. No one will ever know. Top secret tip for you. Right, so that's round 1. The magic circle of 6, and round 2, 2 single crochets into each stitch, equaling 12. So you've doubled it. And what you're going to do now is you're going to increase the round by 6 each time. And we do that in a pattern that goes every single one to begin with, then every other one, and then 1 stitch, 1 stitch, 2 stitches. And then for the next round, 1 stitch, 1 stitch, 1 stitch, 2 stitches. So each time you just add in enough in a balanced pattern to continue to increase the circle in an even way coming out, but not to increase it too quickly. Otherwise, what that would do is it would be curling it up and out, and we don't want that. So let's have a little look at that with a bit more clarity. So we're on round 2 and we've got 12 stitches. Now, what lots of people like to do is use a stitch marker now to make the counting a little bit easier, and so they don't have to count up to the total. And what I use as a stitch marker, so work into the stitch you've just made with your hook, pull a little off cutting of yarn through and just hang it through the work like that. And this is what I do constantly because I just don't find it any less effective than an actual stitch marker. So just hang a bit of yarn over the one that I've just made, and that helps me keep my place. So what we're going to do now, we did 2 into each stitch the previous time. Now we're going to do 1 normal single crochet into the first one, and then 2 into the next. Okay, and that's the pattern that we're going to continue all the way until we get to that marked point. 1 in the first, 1, 2 in the next, 1 in the first, 1, 2 in the next. Tell you, it's a very funny thing looking at your work through a camera at a slightly different angle than it is having it at a natural position in front of you. And I'm aware my hands do occasionally wander, so do tell me in the comments section if that happens, and I'll try harder to keep them placed centrally. Got a little thing hanging around my neck to keep it in place, but it's not the ideal solution, but it's better than balancing it on a stack of books, which is what I used to do. Okay, and we've done that all the way around, and you can see the final stitches were made into that marked stitch. You mustn't miss that one out, or you're not going to have an even increase. And as you can see, there we go, look, we're growing our little flat coaster shape. So first round, magic circle of 6 stitches. Second round, 2 stitches in each stitch of the round to turn it to 12. So that's 6 plus 6. The next round, we want to end up with 12 plus 6. So what we do is we go single crochet, 2 single crochets, single crochet, 2 single crochets, single crochet, 2 single crochets. And we're going to do the same pattern, but increasing the single crochets by 1 the next time. And what that does is gives the circle slow and steady growth in the round. So let's have a look at one more example round here. So as you can see, I've moved the stitch marker to be in the stitch that I just made. We're going to do the same again. So 1 single crochet, 2 single crochets, and then a pair of single crochets. So 1, 1, 1, and 2. The reason that I'm starting with this flat shape for you is that this flat shape is how we build into all the different types of 3-dimensional shape. And we do that by adding what I think of as flat rounds in between as we go. So, for example, if I'm making a circle, I want to evenly increase the sphere with flat rounds, so rounds that aren't counting up. before I count up again. But if I'm making it into a more sort of oval shape, then I'm going to count up in a different way depending on where I want the stretch of the oval to be. This technique is really useful for making animals because it allows you to make the different shapes of the different parts of their body more simply. So there we go. Right, so let's look back again. We've got 6 stitches in the middle. We added 6 for the next one to make 12. We added 6 for the next one to make 18. We added 6 for the next one to make 24. Just going to move that stitch marker for you so you can see where we got to. Counting is incredibly important in crochet. I am not a mathematician. Maths is not my friend. However, the knowing sort of basics of the times tables that you need is helpful, and if you don't know that, just writing down what you want the total in each round to be before you begin, if you're not following a pattern, if you're doing it for yourself, can be incredibly useful. I keep notepads, paper and pen, traditional notepads all over the place to write down what I'm making it. The other thing that we can do from this circle, as well as make three-dimensional objects, is make irregular shaped three-dimensional objects. And this allows us to do things like building up the muzzle here. So we've got this standard shaped increase here, and then I kept the same shape here, but increased it more heavily for the forehead, and it gives a nice expression. So there's a couple of little flat circles for you. What we're going to look at now is how to turn that flat circle three-dimensional. So we're going to start off afresh, and we're going to keep working from a magic circle of 6 because it's easier to learn when we're consistent with the numbers. So magic circle of 6 stitches. Helps if I pick up the yarn, doesn't it? Right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, in general, it really helps to make your shape only sort of turn more three-dimensional from the 3rd row. If you want to put 6 stitches into your 6 stitch magic circle, you can, and it is something that I do when I'm making fine things like tips of tails and stuff like that. But it is not simple, and it is not really necessary a lot of the time, especially if you're trying to make like a round shape. So just like before, we're going to put 2 stitches into each stitch of the magic circle. So 1, a bit of a baggy stitch there, 2, 1, 2. You know, interestingly, that's one of the benefits of having been doing a hobby like this for a long time, is you can instantly see where you've got poor tension. And if I was working this up to be something that I was going to keep or use, I would just have scrapped that and gone back and started again, seeing that the stitch had loose tension. And you don't wait for the whole object to be created. You can just do that straight off the bat, and it saves quite a lot of frustration down the road, and it's just one of those things that you become familiar with over time. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Look at that, did it while chatting. Right, so we once again want to mark where we're starting from to be consistent, but this time our 3rd round is not going to be an increase round where we add in 2 single crochets into some of the rows. We're simply going to add a round of 1 crochet in each row all the way around the circle. So it's going to have the same stitch count as the previous row. So remember, round 1 was a magic circle of 6, so 6 stitches, and round 2 made 2 single crochets into each stitch, totaling 12 stitches. So all you're doing as you go around here is putting 1 single crochet into each stitch. So your stitch count at the end of the round should still be 12. And that's nice and quick and easy to count and check at the end of the round if you're fairly new to crocheting and want a bit of reassurance that you're putting your stitches in the right place. So you see it tries to curl in, but we want the pretty side of the crochet, so we're going to curl it out. So let's make a couple more rounds so that we can look how this increases. So this is your tiny little spherical shape, well, starting to be sort of half moon at the moment. Let's move that stitch marker. And so we're doing our increase from the point that we left off where we were increasing before. So we did a round of a magic circle, 6 stitches. Then we put 2 single crochets into each one. And the next one for increasing would therefore be 1 single crochet, then 2, then 1, then 2, then 1, then 2, all the way around the circle. So let's do that. 1, 1, 2. I'm just going to make that pattern all the way around the edge. There we go. Remembering to make those final 2 stitches into the marked stitch. And as you can see, that's really coming up and out now. So we've added 6 new stitches into our round. So that means our total is now 18. So we're going to make 18 single crochets around again. So a standard round of just 1 single crochet in each, but this time it's going to be 18 times. So if you've not marked your stitch, all you're doing is counting to 18. I highly recommend marking your stitches, even if you're working quietly by yourself in an empty house with no interruptions, just because if your mind starts wandering and you do lose count, it's very frustrating trying to work out where you've got to. The best way to do that, incidentally, is to simply count the stitches. So you can work out how many increases you've done so far if you do that, just counting around the round. But this little marker that you use, that's just a scrap of yarn, is a great way to do it. If I'm working on a toy, normally the scrap of yarn I'll make sure it's from a different type of yarn, so it's even more easy to see and distinctive. Right, so there we go. That's your little raised semicircular shape. And what we need to do now is to make it smaller again. Decreasing crochet is done in exactly the same way as increasing it, by this spread out pattern of decreases or increases. So the last pattern of increases that I did was 1 single crochet and then 2 single crochets. So in order to make it smaller again, I need to go 1 single crochet and then I need to crochet 2 together. So we put our hook through the first one, pick up the yarn, then I'll hook through the one next to it, pick up the yarn and pull through. So you've got 3 strands on your hook. Well, I'm not sure that was actually on screen. Twist the hook and pull it through, and that's it. You have made a single crochet, but it's joined 2 stitches together. So let's see that again, hopefully in the correct position on the screen. So you've done 1 single crochet and then you're going to do a decrease, hook through and pick up, and then all 3 loops on the chain. So it feels a little bit like an amalgam of other stitches if you're used to making double crochets or treble crochets and pulling your hook through different amounts, different loops on the hook. It's a similar feel, but all you're doing is securing those stitches together. And what that does is it draws the material closer and makes it smaller. Now you must remember, when you've made something 3-dimensional that got bigger, that if you want it to get smaller again at the same rate, you still need to put in those interspersed rows of just single crochets in each stitch to make it get smaller at the same rate. So you can see this little decrease, making a tiny yellow bobble here. Right. So when we did our example of getting bigger, we had a round of single crochets at that point. So we're going to do the same thing again for the shrinking side. I'm going to count our way around. 1, Ooh, picked up my tail of thread. That's the downside of using thread. And that is why, as I mentioned earlier, I do it in a different colour if I'm making something I'm going to keep. And that is because you immediately notice if you've drawn through the wrong bit of thread. Maybe I should ask for stitch markers for Christmas. I did used to use them, but you can't get really small stitch markers that easily. And the big chunky ones, they just feel like they sort of get in the way of my fingers. Well, how do you feel about stitch markers? Not a conversation I ever get to have in real life, really. Right, I should strike one up. Okay, here we go, right. And now our final section is we're going to do just what we did before and crochet 2 together. So we've got 12 stitches here. We want to have 6 stitches, so we need to divide it by half, which means we need to crochet every single one together. So let me make my little pretend stitch marker here again. There we go. Pull him through. Lovely stuff, right. So let's see that decrease again. Hook through, pick up the yarn, hook through, pick up the yarn, and all the way through. That's 1. Hook through, pick up the yarn, hook through, pick up the yarn, and then through all the loops. That's 2. And we're just going to continue in that pattern. What you will find, especially if you're using a cotton firm yarn like I am right now, is that you do have to put a bit of brute force into manipulating this round as you go. But you shouldn't have to work overly hard. And there you go. What we're doing is closing up our little circle. Now, to completely close your circle at the bottom, my favourite ways of doing that are, I'll try to see if I can widen this out for you. My favourite ways of doing that are to either continue to do crochet 2 together until you're down to 1 stitch, which can be a little bit fiddly, or to simply get a sewing needle, a yarn needle, a tapestry needle, whatever you want to call it, and pull it through there. So that my fabulous stitch marker has caused a ruckus, caused a problem here. Let's pull that all out. There we go. Lovely. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut off my tail, and I'm going to pull this through the loop. So that's tied off. And then what I can do is simply sew that closed at this end. So probably the neatest way to close your circle up is with a yarn needle. So we're going to thread the yarn onto the needle. It needs to be one with a big eye that isn't too sharp. And then you're going to get this and you're going to go in and out through the adjacent stitches and very gently pull and draw them in together. And as you do that, it's just going to tease your little circle or sphere, as the case may be, closed. Nice and gently. Don't pull too hard. And remember, if this is something that we're going to use, we put some toy stuffing in here that would make that nice and evenly padded as well. But you can see for something that we've just thrown together, we've already got that nice 3-dimensional shape. So that's a quick overview for you of how to make a flat crochet circle and a 3-dimensional crochet sphere. Now, this comes up in all sorts of patterns that you'll use when you're crocheting, but the key is just to remember to keep count of your stitches and to work slowly and gradually. So an increase in every single round if you want it to be flat, and an increase in every other round, or if you want it to be spherical, or spread them out even more if you want it to produce more of an oval shape. I hope that's been helpful, and happy crocheting!